Okay, well, good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is Tree Fruit Growers Collective, and this is our Sunday Night Live. I think we're also live on YouTube. It's nice to have you on board if you're with us. I'm sure people will be joining in. I'm going to start off tonight. Well, first thing I'm going to do is tell you about my 4th of July weekend. Had a great 4th of July weekend. That was kind of fun. Had a lot of family over here Friday night, and they were camped out in the yard. And we had yard Olympics. We played badminton and croquet and cornhole and all of that fun stuff. And yesterday, my wife and I, on the 4th of July, went and saw the new movie Young George Washington at the movie theater. That was really good. That was a great movie and great way to spend the 4th of July. So hope you had a great Independence Day if you live in the U.S. And if you don't live in the U.S., I hope you had a great Sunday anyway. But yeah, we had a long weekend. It was really good. Back to work tomorrow. We're into thinning right now. Still picking a few late cherries. But for the most part, we're thinning. That's our big focus right now, and trying to get them thinned in time. You know, we're at apple harvest right around the corner. We get to the end of July here, and we go into wildfire galas. And once we start picking, we don't stop for the rest of the year until we get to mid-November. We'll be picking all of the way through, and so we're kind of under some pressure to get the thinning done. But Lord willing, we're going to get that done. We left off last week. Somebody had a question for me about fertilizer, and I promised I was going to answer it. And it's just such a big question that I skipped over it. I didn't answer it, and that was the last comment we got, that I didn't answer your question about fertilizer. Sorry about that. I tried to go back and find your name, but the comments and it's just so long that I couldn't find it on short notice. But you know who you are, and for you, I'm going to go back over the fertilizer program again. So tonight, I'm actually going to share this program with you because this is one of the most frequently asked questions we have on this channel. People want to know what the fertilizer program is, and the reason I'm so hesitant to answer it, and I'm always so vague when I answer it, is because it really depends on your soil. It's really dependent upon your soil samples and your leaf samples. It starts with that. You have to do that. As we get to the end of harvest, as we get blocks picked, and as we get closer to the fall, we go at least every other year. We'll go to every single block and we'll pull soil samples. So we know what's going on out in the soils out there. We know what the pHs are. We know what the nitrogen levels are. And we know what to put back in the soil. We don't want to just overload the soil with fertilizer. We only want to replace what it is that the tree is using. We just want to replace that store. But we don't want to put a bunch of fertilizer on for no reason. And now with regenerative agriculture and some of those things, they really want to know about that. They really want to know that you're using science to make good soil recommendations in general. I'm not an agronomist on board. Appleview Orchards is on board. Welcome. Nice to have you with us. I went over this a few more times, but the difference tonight is I'm going to go ahead and post it in the subscribers list on a PDF so you can print that and have it. And again, it's pretty vague, but what I always do is I start with soil samples at the end of harvest. That's very important. And then I do what I call the dormant mix. I meet with my managers in the wintertime, and we sit down with that fertilizer recommendation. We go over every single block, and we develop a mix based on what the soil needs. And it will usually look like, it'll have N in it, it'll have P in it, it'll have K in it for sure. It'll always have NPK. That's the base that I start with. Something, like 30, for example, 30, 40 pounds. Use more P or K, but they're just so expensive that to be honest with you, that's as much as I can afford to do. So it'll start out like that. This is going to be in the PDF here. And then beyond that, I might have a pound of boron if I need a pound of boron. But beyond that, I will be amending the soil for pH or for water penetration or those sorts of things. I'm talking about calcium or lime to bring the pH up or down. Also, I like to use sulfur for that. You can use forms of sulfur that'll help dry that pH. So yeah, the dormant mix, I like to take care of that, the N, P, and K, and the pH. Fertigation. I also have my baby mix on here. The baby mix, when I call the field man, I tell him I want my baby mix. It's always the same thing. It's 30P, 50K, 30N. And then I usually outline the pH one way or the other. A lot of times what I'll do, I like to use Calpril. It's a form of calcium that comes in a prill form, and I'll normally, in a mix like a baby mix like that, I'll just say 100 pounds of Calpril. So I've got the calcium in there. So that's what that'll look like. Again, the next phase after the dormant mix is fertigation. I start fertigation at bud swell. Just as soon as the buds start pushing, I go to fertigating because I know my window for fertilizing is short. I've only got till summer solstice to grow those trees and push them. And any opportunity, I'm trying to get to the top wire. Anytime I miss an application, that's a missed opportunity. So I like to do 2 of those applications a week. Those are bi-weekly, and I want to be putting as much as 10 or 15 pounds of N on every application. My goal is to get to about 150 pounds of growth. So it'd have 10 or 15 pounds. I start off with a mix that looks real similar to my dry mix that I talked about a while ago. 30P, 50K, 30, 40, 50 pounds of N, depending on the block. That mix will look very much like the dry mix, but in a liquid form. Take my 3 applications, and then I'll switch over. For the rest of the fertigation season, all the way up till summer solstice, I will just use a cheap UN32. It's just like putting your foot on the gas pedal. It's just the gasoline. UN32, whatever your cheap form of N is, I would do that through the rest of the season. Why do I stop drop dead date July 15th or summer solstice, whatever comes first? The reason is here we get really hard winters, and sometimes it'll freeze the trees. And if there's still fertilizer in the system and that tree is still pushing, if it hasn't yet pulled its reserve down to the root system and prepared itself for winter time, you'll end up with extensive phloem damage, and maybe even worse, maybe even deeper damage, phloem damage. It'll tend to regenerate itself if you're lucky, but it'll take time. It'll stunt the tree. It'll set you back, and so you don't want to do that. I have a drop dead date. I don't fertigate beyond July 15th, no matter what, because I've learned the hard way. I've made that mistake too many times. I've learned the hard way. So don't do that here. If you're in the USA, you don't want to do that. That may look different if you don't have a dormant season somewhere in the Middle East or somewhere else. After that, after summer solstice, I will continue with humic acids that break down carbon molecules in the soil and allow you to use up the reserve N and stuff that's left over in the soil. I'm a big fan of humic acid. It also builds organic matter in the soil, so I'll continue with humic acids. And you can just use a cheap, H6, 6% humic acid. You can buy those pretty cheaply. There's also very expensive forms of humic acid that your field man will want to sell you, but I would just buy a cheap form of humic acid. It'll break down the carbon molecules and release some fertilizer in the soil. I'll continue with those right up till pre-harvest dates. So you can continue with those, or also amendments like iron amendments or something like that. You can continue with those, but for sure stop the fertilizer midsummer, summer solstice. You don't want to continue. The next phase of my fertilizer program would be foliar sprays. Pink timing's the best timing for those. That pink timing, your magnesium and your manganese and all those sort of things. What do we got? Rafi on board, Sanjay on board, Renia's on board, Shaw's, Muzamil is on board. I'd go with the foliar sprays. I was going to say on fertigation also calcium. I would do calcium injections all the way up till 45 days after full bloom. Again, that's going to be on the PDF. You're going to be able to download that in the subscribers column over there. Foliar sprays like calciums, I would do those all the way up to the pre-harvest interval. I used to do those, weekly. I think I did them for a while, every couple of weeks. Now, I don't know how well they work, those calcium applications, but they make me feel good. And I do think they do some good if you get them on the apple itself. But I don't make special trips to do calcium sprays anymore. I only do them if I'm going through to spray something else and it mixes well in the sprayer. Then I'll put a calcium in there. Be real careful not to do that if it's too hot. If it's above about 85 degrees, you don't want to do that. So again, the last thing I'm going to say, make sure you make corrections based on soil samples. I'm going to put that in the subscriber column. That's Rob's fertilizer program. It's just my program. It's just what I do. I'm not an agronomist. I have a basic understanding of agronomy. I've been doing this for many, many years, and it's served me very well. About it for some time, and I'm going to go ahead and pass that on to you because I think there's a lot of people here that may very well help. So I hope that helps you. Moving on to the questions. Buyakub Eunice says, in my open center trees, there's an interesting method that I've tried. I just left the block unpruned for 1 year. Next year, I did prune those trees, and they simply calmed down. What do you think of this method? Did it work because it's correct, or did it work because it's luck? Buyakub, it worked because it is correct. It's absolutely correct, and it's based on science. And it's one of the things that we talked about. Every cut that you do in the dormant season is an invigorating cut. So if you do 100 cuts on a tree, that's 100 I'm going to talk about program in just a minute. Sorry about that. I lost my place there. Got it. Every cut tree, that's 100 invigorating cuts. So you're going to wind that tree up. It's absolute science. You absolutely did the right thing. It just, it makes perfect sense that if you don't prune that tree, it's going to calm down. The other thing you could do, depending on where you live, is just what I was talking about a little bit ago. You could wait till summer solstice and then prune that tree. That would be a summer pruning cut, which is a de-invigorating cut. And that will actually do you even more good. Because instead of being a neutral cut, it will actually de-invigorate the tree. But what you did was correct. It's a great way to calm a tree down, and it's a good question. Christian Smith, do you use overhead irrigation during high heat cycles? We absolutely do, yes. Been using overhead cooling for 20, 25 years. The truth of the matter here is in Washington State, years ago, most all of our irrigation was overhead irrigation. Had so many problems with mildew and fire blight, and it just created so much humidity out in the orchard that we've really moved away from them, but we still have some of those. But what we have gone to is we've gone to overhead sprays. We've got a lot of R10s. We've got a lot of a new one that we have. I think it's called an R35. It's the newest one that we're using. But also a lot of foggers. We do a lot of foggers and Honeycrisp and Cosmic Crisp and Envy varieties. So yeah. Usually about 90 degrees we'll turn on, or when the skin temperature gets up to 90 degrees on the apple, we'll turn on the water on if we have enough water. In other cases, we cycle that water. But yes, we do time of the year. The thing you want to bear in mind about that is your question is about irrigation, and you have to be careful when you're using that for overhead cooling because most of that water evaporates. It simply evaporates into the air. So you do get some in the soil, and you do kind of get to count it, but you really want to keep your eye on it because it'll fool you. Fact of the matter is, we don't even irrigate Honeycrisp this time of the year. We'll only do the overhead because it will give you some benefit, and the apples will continue to grow. But you really want to keep an eye on it because most of that water will evaporate into the air. So, good question, Christian. Showcat Dar from Kashmir asks, I planted Shanico Red Gala last year. The trees reached the top wire. That's pretty good in 2 years. Good job. And have about 40 good-sized apples per tree. So 40 apples in a 10 by 2 spacing would be 40 per acre. So I don't know what your spacing is, but 40 apples in the second leaf. That's really good. Says he has a dense canopy, but fruit has less color than other orchards. Could this be the variety, last year's NPK use, the dense canopy, or something else? Well, you've already got it up to the top wire. My guess is you've got a lot of head in the system. And anytime you grow a tree up to the top wire and you're pushing it up to the top wire, it takes a year or two for that tree to settle down and to come into its own, and then it'll be giving you right-sized fruit and really, really good color. But one of the negative things for fruit color, one of the most negative things, is too much end. So now that you've made the top wire, go ahead and begin to pull your end back. If you can, maybe even summer prune those. Say you got a lot of foliage there, heavy canopy, you can go in there and summer prune those so that you get some sunlight. But I would pull back the end, consider summer pruning. Hakab Pagashan says, why a lot of fruit of pear have dropped? Why did his pears drop? That's the question. I've been growing pears since I was a little boy, and I don't know why those pears drop. I'm sure there's a scientific answer for that, but I can tell you that pears drop. They just do. That stem, that area around that stem, it'll loosen up as that pear grows, and it'll begin to separate. And if you wait for a pear to get yellow, it'll just simply drop on the ground. Pears are not designed to be picked when they're yellow. I know they're yellow when they get to the store, but you pick a pear when it's green. So it's important that you pick it at the right time. You want to have the starches right and the pressures right. You're going to monitor that. When you get the right pressure, whatever, 18 pounds or whatever it is, and you get the right starch level, you're going to want to pick that thing at the right time. Hey, Terry's on board tonight. Sandeep is on board. Shaky Branch Honeybee, Justin Collard. I recognize all of those names. Nice to have you guys on board. But yeah, pears just like to drop. What can you do? Pick it on time. That's the first thing. Keep it properly irrigated. Right? It's called NAA. It used to be called NAA 200. I think it's called NAA 800 now, but it's NAA. And you spray NAA a couple of weeks before harvest. It'll make those stems tighten up, and it'll prevent most of that drop. So if you're growing conventional, using some NAA, otherwise known as stop drop. So we also use stop drop. Stop drop would be your answer. BH10F. Does Gala plants need pollinizers or not? If yes, how much? Yes, Galas need pollinizers. For Galas, I've used everything from Fuji, Granny, Red Delicious. Those three work very well. I think I've even used crab apples in Galas. Yes, Galas need a pollinizer. How much? 2 to 4%. Yeah, 2 to 4%. Yeah, I'd like to have 4%. Yes, Galas need a pollinizer. Good question. Thakur Lala, Udunachi. We have a problem here in blind bud and branch. What you do, PGR or other things. He's talking about Proman notching. That question's going to come up here again in a moment. So the other thing I decided to share with you guys tonight, finally, after about 35 years, I'm going to share my Proman formula for branching. That question's probably been asked about 200 times in this channel. I don't like to ever give out anything that's proprietary, but this is my formula. I've developed this formula over the last 35, 40 years. It's served me very well, and for you guys, I'm going to go ahead and again, I'm going to put that in the subscriber column. I'm going to give it to you guys. Basically, it's 1 and 6. 1 part's Proman to 6 parts paint. 8 ounces of Proman, 48 ounces of paint. I'm going to put that in the subscribers column along with the instructions of how you do that, how you start, how far apart to put those. Basically, you want to notch about a ½ inch above the bud on a chosen bud where you want the limb to break. So decide that first, where you want the limb to break, notch about a ½ inch above the bud. I like to use the little sponge paint brushes that have the little tip on them. I dip them in that solution that I just described to you, and I'll stick that right in that notch that I had just done on the tree there. Being careful that I don't do it all over the place because it'll translocate and it'll get on the bud and it'll kill the bud. So you just want to get it down in that area that you've notched with a little hacksaw blade or something really fine above that bud. And those will give you a really good break. So I'm going to go ahead and post the Proman technique. I hope it'll help a lot of people. That's why I'm going to go ahead and do it. I don't give recommendations for chemicals on this channel, but I'm going to share that formula with you tonight because I think it'll help a lot of people. I do want to say this about it. What have we got here? I'm sorry, I haven't got my glass. Sanjay's on board. Roni's on board. Booyakoob. I think we just answered one of your questions a minute ago. Nice to have you on board. I already talked. Oh, Keith is on board. Roni's on board. Yeah, real good. I posted that. What I wanted to say is Proman is not necessary. I've had really, really good success scoring above a bud and not putting Proman in and getting branches to break. Do I have better success? Do I better take using the Proman? I absolutely do, especially in cherries. But you'll get real good success. You'll have 70-80% success rate even without using the Proman. So I just want to say that. If you can't get your hands on Proman, otherwise known as GA6 gibberish, can't get your hands on that, don't worry. Follow the same instructions without the Proman, and it'll work for you. Bhupendir Barwaj says, how to stop rusting. He says rusting in apples, and he's talking about rusting. Somebody asked a question last week, and I couldn't think of the name of what I was trying to think about, but I did remember it. There's some preventive fungicides that you can use. There's 2 of them. Manzaseb is one of them that you can use, otherwise known as Manzate back in the day, and Captan. You can use those 2 things as a preventative in order to not get rusting in apples. They're very expensive. I've used them before. I don't use a lot of them anymore. If you was in a real wet situation, you had a real problem with rusting, I would use them. I just haven't been forced to use them. I think back in the day I used to use them on Goldens where we went through a weather pattern where we were having some real bad rusting. But there's just a lot of cultural practices you can do that prevent rusting. One of those is avoiding mildew. If you get that shine of mildew over your fruit, it'll cause rusting. You may not attribute it to mildew, but mildew will cause rusting. So keep your mildew under control. Keep that tightened up. Always spray in good drying conditions. I've seen more rusting for people spraying when their under tree sprinklers are on, or when there's dew in the orchard, or when it rained last night. I've seen more people destroy a crop from rusting from that than any other thing. That's the #1 culprit. Your sprayer out there spraying in a wet orchard. That's what causes most of the rusting, in my opinion. Other chemicals that you can use later. There are a few that you can use later. Same chemicals basically that you would use for mildew. Spray in good drying conditions. Really be careful during bloom time. Most rusting, I don't know if that's true. A lot of rusting happens during the bloom period. That's when that water will get down. It will settle in those blooms, and as that flower begins to form into an apple, it will go around the apple, and as it grows, you'll end up with that russet monkey face that we talked about here recently. The other thing is you want to avoid mixing too many chemicals, or if you don't know what you're doing, mixing chemicals that don't go together, that are caustic when mixed together. So be careful about, as I said, Manzate, Captan, those sort of things that should help you with rusting. You by Id said, is bending necessary in M9 or not? I don't know if it's necessary. Moved away from informal systems many years ago. That's what I try to teach on this channel. Formal systems. I want to be able to know how long my limb is, how many apples that limb's supposed to have. I want to be able to count those apples. I want to know through the entire growing season I have. So I want a formal system. So I pull down all limbs, regardless of what root stock it's on. So that's my short answer. Is it necessary? Probably not. Will it fruit better? Yeah, probably will. What do we got? And Incock 1320. Nice to have you guys on board. David Tower, what do you figure the cost is per acre on apples for labor alone, for installing the vertical strings, tying up the new growth every 4 inches, so tying down the lateral limbs? This seems like a huge investment of manpower and money. It is a huge investment. It costs a lot of money. It costs somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 an acre to plant, trellis, get the trees, get them in the ground, have an irrigation system, get the tree trained to the wire and ready to grow. It's going to be more dependent on if you own the land, or it's going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $50,000. That's what it's going to cost. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's the gist of it. I will from time to time mention cost per acre on the channel, but everybody knows that, I think, basically somewhere in the neighborhood you're going to put in. Adil here said, could I make orchard 8-foot row to row? And so he wants to do 8-foot row to row and 3-foot in the row. Manually manage 600 plants. Yeah, 600 plants. He's wanting to do an 8x3. Can he do it? The question is it practical? And he wants to plant manually. I'll say first that I used to plant with a machine, with a GPS machine. We'd plant 3 or 4 rows at a time. I don't plant apples with a machine anymore. I abandoned that about 12 years ago. I only plant apple trees by hand now. I plant every single tree by hand. The reason I do that is I've learned the hard way that I want to have my trellis system up and at least the first wire, so that when I plant a tree, on the day that the tree's planted, it's in the ground, it's bent over to the angle I want it at, it's clipped on the wire, the top of it is pruned, the irrigation is ran, and the water is on the day that it was planted. That's the best way to get a tree in the ground and get that tree anchored and get it to grow. So that has forced me to only plant apple trees by hand. So what we'll do is if the trellis posts are 40 feet apart, we'll have a 20-foot, or if they're, let's say they're 30 feet apart, whatever they are, we'll have a pipe that's 30 feet long, and we'll have the tree space painted on the pipe. So they'll dig those holes in that spacing and plant them, pull the pipe down to the next trellis, and do the same thing over and over again. But I plant all apples by hand. But your question also asked about the spacing. You want to do a spacing that is 8 foot by 3 foot. I would not do an 8-foot spacing, 8 foot in a row. That's too close. By the time you grow that tree 12 foot tall, you're going to be shading out the opposite row, and you don't want to do that. For many, many years, up until about 10 years ago, I planted rows 10 foot apart, and that works. 10 foot is the minimum, but I've actually gone to 12 foot because however tall that is, that's how much space you need for light penetration to get down into that bottom wire, and it's real important that you have that space in the row. So you might be able to cram more trees in there, but you won't get good light penetration, which you really need. So in my opinion, 8 foot's a little bit too close. I'd move that out to 10 foot if you can. Gurmir Guru says, what do you think about G214 rootstock? I don't have any. I don't have any experience with that, so I don't know much about it. I don't have a 214, so sorry about that. Hans Raj says, G969 and 8, and who is best for replantation, side hill, self-standing? I've got some Cosmic Crisp on 890 planted right next to some Cosmic Crisp on the Geneva 969, just side by side, and you can barely tell the difference. The 890s are stronger, there's no question about that, but not much. The 969's got a lot of horsepower too, so you could use either one of those. If I had to pick, I'd pick the 890 in your situation. I just talked about having the reason that I plant apple trees by hand is that first day I want it secured to the wire. The reason for that is you will lose so much growth through the micro hairs that are down in the root system. Those things will grow out and grab that soil, but every time the wind blows and that tree blows and that root system moves, you break those micro hairs, you lose ground in growing that tree. So I want that tree anchored. So the one thing I would recommend to you, if you're going to have those freestanding, at least put them on a bamboo. You want to hold that tree. You don't want that tree blowing around that first year or two. You want that root system anchored in that soil, so those fine root hairs are grabbing and doing what they need, flushing and grabbing minerals and nutrients and doing what they're supposed to do. I would recommend the 890 to answer your question. The 969 would work just as well, and I would anchor those things in if you have some way to do that. So I recently, what do we got here? Sakir is blowing. Boramaj is on board, Justin Kolarek's on board, and Hamid Iqbal is on board. Nice to have you on board. Thanks for joining us. I recently viewed your video about PGR usage, and I want to know about the timing and the usage and the doses. Well, Muhammad, today's your lucky day. After weeks and weeks of me saying I'm not going to post the program, I posted it today. Just went over that a few minutes ago. I went over to the program, but you're going to find that in the subscriber section. I'm going to give that to you. So that'll be on a PDF, and you can download it. Yeah, hope that helps. Biku Rangta says, fungicides most effective against Alternaria and Marsonia, otherwise known, I think, as leaf blotch, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, same two chemicals we talked about a few minutes ago for russet. The same two chemicals will help you preventatively here. That's Manzoseb or Captan. That'll help you against Alternaria and Marsonia for leaf blotch. Those will work as a preventive. If you already get it, then you're going to want to go to your normal mildew sprays, your Fontellus, your Luna, your Marabon, or your Flint, or those other mildew sprays that you've already been using. Those will help you as well. Rainsbrook Nursery, my wooden posts only last 5 years. Are yours special? No, my wooden post, Rainsbrook Nursery, are not special. I have crews out there right now just replacing wooden posts. So mine are the same as yours. I do get more than 5 years out of them. I think we generally get about 10 years out of those. 10 to 15 years out of those. So your soil might be a little bit wetter than ours, a little bit more clay or whatever. But we do get more than 5 years out of them. But they're not anything special. No, they still rot out. And we have organic blocks, and they sell those little boots that you put down at the bottom of them, those little rubber boots. But in my opinion, I think those things gather more water and enhance rotting. So I'm not sure I'm going to recommend those. I'm not sure those things really work like they're told to work. But no, we're constantly replacing those also. That's the big reason that we've really tried to move to steel, galvanized steel whenever we can. But we still have a lot of wood out there, and we go through the same thing that you go through. We got to be out there replacing those. So hope that helps. Sakri Dagra says, what infection of this? He put a picture on here, right there. And I know what that is. We just talked about it. What infection is this? In India, it is unknown. That's what we just talked about a few minutes ago. It is Marsonia leaf blotch. That's exactly what that is. Pretty obvious from the picture. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. So yes, Manzoseb or Captan, and if you already got it, you can resort to those other mildew sprays, fungicides that we just talked about, the Flint and the Marabon and those. But Manzoseb or Captan, that's going to be your friend in that. Shahan Deepak, how about M7? I get this question every week about M7. And I always say, oh yeah, it's a great rootstock, and we've moved away from it, and it is a good rootstock. I know a lot of people have M7 out there, but tonight, since it's the day after 4th of July, I'm just going to be real honest with you. I'm going to tell you the negative things about M7. The thing that we hated about M7 is it just has too many suckers. M7 is famous, and it's renowned for throwing a lot of suckers. So you always have to deal with those, whether you're spraying herbicide or whatever it is. That's a problem. So it throws a lot of suckers. Also, maybe as a side effect of throwing a lot of suckers, which is a survival mechanism, it doesn't have a tendency to anchor well in the row. We just talk about trees anchored in the row. M7 is famous for having leaner rows. I don't know why. I don't know what the science of it, but it's always been accused of being susceptible or sensitive to woolly apple aphids. That's another, could be a myth, could be a wives' tale, but it's known that M7 is susceptible to woolly apple aphids, also prone to Phytophthora. That's a negative one that I've mentioned 7 times on here. There's still a lot of M7 in the ground. We've kind of moved away from it just because we found rootstocks that are a little better. I don't want to discourage you if you have an M7. It has anchoring problems. It's prone to get woolly apple aphid for whatever reason. I don't know the science behind that. I hope that helps. Sanam Chopra says, immunotherapy in apple orchard. This is kind of a new induced resistance. That's what it stands for, or boosting or enhancing the immune system. I know a lot about it. I've started to learn a little more about it. There's a lot of snake oil out there. So for me, just years I've come down to new products. I'll just be real honest with you. So somebody got to really sell me on a product to get me, to get beyond the whole concept of snake oil. But there is validity in some of these products. I use a product for fire blight called Actigard. I started using that years ago. Actigard is, you can spray it on or you can put it through the drip system. Its job is to enhance and prepare and to boost the immunity system and get that thing ready for an incoming incident, the fire blight. And I've done trials with that where I've done half a block with it and half a block didn't have it, and I saw big results out of that. I've taken the samples and did the studies, and I think there's something to it. So is there something to immunotherapy? Yeah, I'm anxious to learn more about it. But I want to see the universities and I want to see the science behind it and learn more about it before I pour a lot of money into it. But I think there's something there. I hope that helps. I know I didn't answer your question because I don't know a lot about it. But I am playing with it a little bit. Caleb Coulter says, what Sunscald products work well and are easy for the packing houses to wash off? Also, what are the best practices for reflective ground cloth, timing, application, removal, coloring benefits, and risk of heat stress or lower canopy sun scald? That's a big question. You're asking about my program for sunscreen products. I love Parka. I use on all the red varieties. A lot of times it'll work well in a row where you get some shading from the east side to the west side. A lot of times I'll still do microcal on the borders. I really like microcal. It's a kaolin type product similar to Surround, but you mentioned packing houses. Packing houses struggle a little bit with Surround sometimes, depending on the packing house. Surround can be tough to get out of the stem bowl and out of the calyx end, so I don't use a lot of Surround. I'll use it for other applications, on cherries for doubling and for pears, for Paracel and different things, but I don't use it for a sunburn protectant. A lot of people do, and I respect that. It's a decent product, but again, it's the issue of the packing shed of getting that cleaned off the apple. For my powdery product, I've really moved to microcal. I use that on all my grannies or goldens. I would use microcal, and even blocks that don't have overhang, can't really hold with a Parka. I'll go ahead and use a microcal. I trust that product. You got to get 3 or 4 coats on it, and then if I'm going to get a real hot event, I'll go through and I'll do borders in the west side of the tree. If I got 100 degrees incoming, I'll go do that. But my normal program would be 3 applications of Parka spaced, 10 to 14 days apart, all the way up till it starts getting hot. Then I'll deal with borders in the west sides. Same thing with the microcal. I want to get three coats on the whole tree. Then if I get incoming really hot events, we get 2 or 3 of those a year. I'll do the borders and I'll do every other row. I do use some Extend-A as much as I own. I think we have 200 or 300 acres of Extend-A. I'll put those in real high foliage, very dense V-trellis blocks, and I'll put them out pretty early. I'm rolling out some Extend-A. The Mylar, during the hot cooling season, we put that out about 10 days before harvest because we want to get the most use out of it as we possibly can. And when you're overhead cooling, it doesn't last very long. When we get later in the season, then we're not overhead cooling as much. I want to put it out as early as I possibly can. I just want to get the most usage out of it. So July and the first part of August, I want to put it out 10 days before harvest. But beyond that, as we start getting closer to fall and the sun starts setting at a different angle, I will put it out at that. I'll do some videos this year. I love a leaf blower. So Parkra, Microcal, Inorganics, I love Oasis. Oasis O. That's a great product for it, but I don't want to go into too much detail on those. I hope that helps. That's it. Honey, what kind of questions do you have? Like you've got some questions right here, so that's good. That means we've got quite a few people on board. Okay, Heidi Gross, have you ever tried Edifon for color? Yes, I have tried Edifon for color. Used it very successfully for color. I thought about using it for color last year. Our problem is just for like some of our audits that we have, best grower practices, and just some of our customer base, we don't use any late season Ethrol anymore, or Edifon's what you're talking about here. So, but it's still legal and you can still do it, and it does work. It can increase bruising when you're picking, so you want to be aware of that. It can do that, but yes, I have used Edifon for color, and it does work, and it has some benefit for return bloom when it's used later in the season. So yes, it does work. Also seen Retain used for color. Sandeep Shah, the best time to go for girdling in order to reduce the vigor and convert the buds to fruiting buds. The best time to do that would be full bloom. That time right around full bloom. 2 or 3 weeks before to 2 or 3 weeks after. But if I was going to pick the perfect time, Sandeep, it would be full bloom. Would be the best time to do that. But you can do that right up to, those buds are pushing. So, Rafi Odar, manage crown rot treatment. For the rootstock, how to improve M9 crown rot treatment. Yeah, M9, we just talked about that. M9, M7, those can be real susceptible to crown rot. Now, we've talked about that a little bit. Crown rot soil, you want to make sure you have good drainage. Don't overwater, make sure you have good drainage. Some cases, we've had to go in and put in tile drainage in order to get good drainage. It could be managing your water to where you're doing just short burst of water. So manage your drainage and get the right rootstock. Use resistant rootstocks, although any rootstock will get it. I've got it. I've seen it on Geneva 41. Any rootstock will get it. But some are much more susceptible, such as the M9 that you have here. 2 treatments that I would recommend is Ridamel and Linebacker. Seem to work pretty well. So you can use those. How to improve fruit size? Thin early. Thin early. And once you get them thin, really by the time that thing gets golf ball size, it's already determined, that apple's already determined how big it's going to be. All you're going to do is deduct from its potential. I always say that. So you have to have proper water management. That's really, really important. Stay on top of that. You can pulse that water at night. We have some technology that will actually help us with our irrigation sets, that if we want to achieve a certain size, we've been able to do that scientifically. Manage your water correctly. You don't want to overwater. Thin early, and you should get them to the right fruit size. What do we got here? Daniel Keserly, Alan Crane, Don Nightingale, Hortitech Nursery, and Danny Kazurl. Nice to have you on board tonight. What do we got? Terry Plant. Hey, Terry. Hello. What about fertilizing cherry trees this time of year? Yes. A couple things about that. My big trees, I'll fertilize those. What I always do with cherries post-harvest, if I'm still trying to grow the tree, I keep the water going. I keep it at 80% of soil moisture capacity. Young and growing cherry trees, right after you pick them, will root flush. And when they root flush, they'll take in nutrients and you'll get another growth spurt. So if you really want to grow those cherries, you can keep pushing those things right after harvest, knowing I just went to a seminar, a cherry meeting here, I don't know, it's been 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they talked about that right after harvest, those roots will flush, and they'll take in calcium, they'll take in nutrients, and you'll get a nice little growth spurt out of them. So something you're wanting to grow, I do it right after harvest. Anything else, if it's a big tree and I'm not trying to grow it, one thing I'll do is after harvest, I'll do what I call kicking them in the kneecaps. I know that's not scientific terminology, but what I will do is I'll pull the water back from them, and I'll stress them really, really hard. I'll stress them until they stop growing and they set a terminal bud. You'll see those little buds set, and once that bud sets, that terminal set, it won't grow anymore the rest of the year, and then you can water it and fertilize it all you want. Usually on big trees that are already grown, I'll just do a fall fertilizer. But if it's a young block and I'm trying to get it to grow, I'll do it immediately after harvest. So yeah, now's a great time of year to do that, Terry. Hope that helps. Roni K says, Sir, M9 rootstock, main Trex Gala growth issue, what am I doing? Sir, M9 rootstock, main Trex Gala growth issue, what I am doing? I don't have enough information to answer your question here. M9 rootstock, main Trex Gala growth issue, what am I doing? I'm sorry, Roni, I don't have enough information to give you an intelligent answer. If you can give me a little more detail on that, I'd be happy to answer it for you. Hamid Equal, how do you get early color in Gala? How do you get early color in Gala? The best thing you can do to have early color in Gala is choose the right variety. Of course, we have wildfire Galas. They're really, really early. It's not the best Gala, but it's an early Gala, so that's one way to get early color. The best way to get early color in Gala is to make sure you have your nitrogen depleted by harvest time. So put your nitrogen on early. Only put on what the tree actually needs. That could be 0 in some cases. Get your nitrogen on early to make sure that when it comes harvest time, when that apple's coloring up, that nitrogen's already depleted. Beyond that, you can down mylar. I just mentioned that. We go in there before harvest and we'll lay down a fabric, a foil fabric, it's called mylar, that reflects that sunlight back up, and it will help those apples color up. But my best advice for you is to your nitrogen and make sure it's depleted by harvest time. Appleview Orchard, stop, drop, and retain in the same. Asking for Honeycrisp. That's a good question. I've never done that, but I don't see why not. The only thing I'd really caution you on is retain is finicky. And you want to do that in the cool morning hours, and you want to do it if the tree's actually, after it's where that wet droplet is going to stay on that leaf for a while. It's a little more finicky than say the NAA, but I don't see any reason why not. I think the timing's very similar. Ask your field man, but I like it. I think it'll work. I'm assuming you're using the retain for stop drop. Yeah, that's same timing. Yeah, yep. You're gonna use that retain to keep that fruit a little bit firmer. Stop drop. That's about 2 weeks before harvest. That would be a good timing. I kind of moved away from retain for that purpose. I do use retain, but I use a lot of Harvista. I'll be talking about that a lot more as we get closer to harvest. Retains are expensive, and I've done the math, and I think last year it was, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it was like 2x of what Harvista was. And I'm not a Harvista salesman. I'm not trying to sell Harvista, but I think it's for what I need it for. It works really, really well for logistics and harvest and fruit firmness and storage and all these things the retain does for less money. And I think the retain is a little. You got to be more on your game to get that right. That's just my opinion. But yes, could you do it with the stop drop? Yes, I think that'd be a good combination. I said a whole lot there about nothing there. I went a lot of circles there, but I hope that helps. Sandeep Chandel, when we pull out nitrogen or reducing vegetative growth, do we get smaller apples? Do we get smaller apples? I don't think so. No, I've got a lot of blocks where I put 0. I've got, it depends on the variety to some degree, but no, I have a lot of blocks where the tree is matured and it's settled down, and we're putting on 0 in, and it doesn't affect apple growth if you have the if you do proper irrigation, you do everything right, and your soil's amended correctly. No, should still be able to achieve fruit size. Aaron Post, what's your best rootstock for high density apple orchard? What do you think is the best spacing, row to row and tree to tree? Okay, Aaron, best rootstock for high density apple orchard. If I had my way and I was rich and I could plant as many trees as I wanted, I would plant bud nines about a foot apart, and that would be my favorite. But I can't do that; it's not realistic. But if I could, I would. And if I had an area that had real heavy soils, real heavy clay soils, and it was hard to get a tree to grow, I would just really use an 890. But those are two extremes. That's from one extreme to the other. So I'm just going to say your average block where you can get a tree to grow and it's reliable and dependable. My favorite rootstock would probably be somewhere in the middle. It would be Geneva 41. I would choose Geneva 41. I think that's a really good middle of the road rootstock. It has a lot of good characteristics. Got a lot of them. I really like it. Best spacing row to row, I like 12 foot in the row. I've kind of gone to that over the last, well, everything I do now is in 12-foot row spacing. 10 foot's okay. I wouldn't go any closer than that, and I wouldn't go any farther apart than 12 foot. It's just a total waste of space. At that time, by the time you get beyond 12 feet, you have to go to an informal system where you're growing limbs out into the row again, and you're not counting buds. I think in a perfect world, I would have 2.5 feet in the row on a Geneva 41 in a 12-foot row. That's what I do, frankly. Do a lot of that. Sorhat Marwaj, is UFO a successful training method? Please tell me about UFO. I'm not going to go into too much detail on UFO because if you go back just about 2 weeks, my wife Marlon put together a great commentary on UFO. Just go back and you'll be able to find that. And I bet that's in the school and the subscribers also. She put together a really cool deal on Cherry UFO training. UFO, what's that stand for? Upright fruiting outreach, or anyway, what it means is all the limbs grow vertically up off of a bottom leader, like you would see on a grape plant, but they're really tall. UFO is a great system, but like I said too, in detail, you better be a pretty good manager to grow on a UFO system. And if you are a good manager, you can do very well on it, probably better than any other system. You pull that plant down, it really wants to be fruiting. You're renewing that wood all the time. If you have a good program of getting in there with ATS or thinning those flowers off, you can achieve good fruit size and grow 10 tons of fruit all day long. Yes, UFO can be very successful, but it's very expensive, and that's why I don't do it. If it wasn't so expensive, I'd like to do a lot more of it. I'm a fan of it, and I follow it, and I like to go to other people's orchards and see it. I don't have any myself. Yeah, upright fruiting offshoot. Thank you, Marlon. I knew that, but it slipped my mind. So yeah, love UFO. Go back to our we got a lot of information on UFO from just a couple weeks ago. I think you're going to really enjoy that. Marlon did a great job putting together a little sheet on that. You're going to really enjoy that. Appleview orchards. How many bushels in your sower get from Packer on average? A ballpark, high, low in the last 5 years. Okay, you're looking for a ballpark. Appleview orchards. This is Michigan grower. I think this is a Michigan grower. I don't talk, maybe not Michigan, because he's talking in terms of bushels. And I don't talk in terms of bushels, but I do talk in terms of a 40-pound box. So generally we put a few less Honeycrisp in a bin because they have a tendency to bruise. So generally around 20 to 22 boxes per bin. Bitter pit, how much do you throw away? What are your pack outs? Hey, in a real good high altitude upper valley Yakima, you might get 70 or 80% pack outs on Honeycrisp because it's really made high altitude, perfect scenario situation. You can be very successful in having good pack outs in Honeycrisp. We've got a few growers here that grow up in Titan, grow up in that region, and as long as you don't have a bad bitter pit year, you can have some really good pack outs on Honeycrisp. Some of our warmer areas where we try to grow Honeycrisp, we end up with a lot more bitter pit, and a 50 or 60% pack out might be a good pack out. So your question is on average. If I had to guess, I would say on average, for every 10 boxes of Honeycrisp that we grow, we 4 on average, something like that. If I had to guess, it's a large number. Luckily, they're worth a little bit more money, but still, it's sometimes hard to break even. The real key to Honeycrisp is not to have a high bitter pit. So you want to really watch your calcium. Crop load. Crop load is key. You want to make sure you manage that crop load. You don't want too many apples, and you don't want a small crop. They'll really have a tendency to get bitter pit. And of course, we deficit irrigate those. If you pour the water to those Honeycrisp, they'll just keep growing, and they'll get up before harvest and the bitter pit will show. So yeah, 20 to 22 boxes per bin. That's what we grow. And in a good growing area, we can get a 70 or 80% pack out on a box of Honeycrisp. In a warmer area where it's a little tougher to grow Honeycrisp, if I had a 60 or 70% pack out, I'd be really happy with that. So I hope that helps. Hortitech Nursery. Can Promlin increase Gala apple size still 40 days to harvest? I don't think so. I think in order to increase apple size, Promlin, it's a PGR, it's a growth regulator, and I think its function is cell elongation, maybe cell division too. But really elongation is what I see it doing in an apple. And the timing for that is 80 to 100% full bloom in really good condition, 78 degree weather. 40 days to harvest. I think that's a little late to affect size. So I'm not saying it won't work. I've never done it and I wouldn't try it. So yeah, I think you want to do that around full bloom. Jordan McIntyre. Hi, Rob. I have several backyard apple, Macintosh and Liberty Misty. Those are old ones. But I have a stamen. Well, all the trees are flourishing. The wine sap almost lost all its leaves. I'm in the middle of Tennessee, and I'm wondering if the tree might not have left dormancy. It was unusually warm this past summer. That's very possible. I mean, as I was reading, some sort of phloem damage, but if it was unusually warm, maybe you didn't get enough chill hours. It very, very well may be, and maybe the wine sap was sensitive to that. Jordan, send me some pictures. Let me get a look at it. It could be something else that's real obvious that I might be able to identify, but you're probably on the right track if you're in Tennessee. But yeah, maybe you can send me a picture. I'd like to get a look at it. Sachin Dobruk. Sorry about that. Sir, if it's Monzonia leaf blotch, then why Benzoseb, Captan, Luna, and Maravon doesn't work and treat this disease for past years? Some call it necrotic leaf blotch and some alternaria leaf blotch, but it's not getting cured, and it appears on the leaf overnight and spread very far. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. That's the only treatments that are available to us. I'm sorry those aren't working for you. You might have developed some resistance to those. That happens here. We've got a lot of fungicides here that just, I mean, they said they were going to develop resistance back in 1977, and here we are, and we're still using some of those products. I just rotate the class. You know, that's what they always tell you is make sure you're rotating those different classes that have different modes of action. That's all you can do. But the only two that I know to recommend to you is Manzaseb and Captan. I'm sorry, that's all that I know. And then I think post-treatment would be a Luna, Maravon, or something like that. That's what I know. If there's something out there beyond that, and somebody's listening that can help us out a little bit, please help us out with that. But in my experience, that's all that I know. What do we got here? We've got Alok Singata on board, Conwar's on board, Louis Cabalas, and Danielle Kezerdy's on board. Nice to have you on board. A lot of good questions tonight. Alok Singata, bending shouldn't be done below horizontal. Bending shouldn't be done. So he's got a comment here, and he says bending should not be done below horizontal, and I would kind of agree with that. I wouldn't bend below horizontal. There's no reason to do that. I don't think I've ever recommended that. I do pull down to horizontal if I have a wire, but if I don't have a wire, as long as you get those things pulled down, they'll settle down and begin to set up for a bud. So I would agree with that. I wouldn't pull it below horizontal. Again, this is a lock again. Sir, please tell in apple hip. What's that saying?
HDP.
HDP. Should we do bending below? We just talked about that. Yeah, and I just talked about size and gala. I wouldn't do bending below horizontal. I'm not sure what you're trying to get at there, but no, I wouldn't bend below horizontal. There's no reason to do that. A really super strong limb and you pulled it below horizontal, would it hurt anything? Wouldn't hurt anything. But I'll tell you, I made this comment when I first started this page about how sap doesn't flow up. Sap doesn't flow down, sap doesn't flow up, and oh my goodness, the haters have been on me ever since. And because technically sap does flow down. We all know that sap circulates and it makes its way through the phloem. Yes, sap flows down. But trees like to grow up. Trees like to grow up toward the sunlight. Sap likes to flow up. It really does. The reason I'm making this comment, your comment is about pulling below horizontal. When I go back at the end of the year, apple harvest, the one thing that I notice every single year, and it's always a failure in my mind, is when I walk out in the orchard and the leaf falling off the tree, and there's millions of apples hanging out there on that tree that didn't get picked. And I look at the apples, and in 90% of the cases, every single time, it will be some pendant branch that's hanging down or some limb that's below horizontal. It will be some limb where the sap has been forced to flow down to that apple, and it ends up being a little teeny apple that we don't even pick. And that's why I always say sap doesn't flow down, it flows up. I know sap flows down, But my point is, if you want to have big apples, leave upright shoots. You can pull down to horizontal, but I'm going to agree with you. I see what your point is here. I wouldn't pull below horizontal. Some of that it just ends up being small apples and it don't get picked. So valid point. I get what your point is now. I'm gonna have to get me a drink of water here. So let me just take a quick break here, and we'll get the ball pre question. We're gonna get more questions here, Annie, and we'll be an hour in. We'll have it. Best way to size and crisp up a Lapin cherry. Last few years, we're seeing smaller and softer Lapin. Doing multiple foliar calcium, but I think quality breeder 2024. Belpreet, I'm going to tell you that big Lapin starts at pruning time. You're not getting size that you want in your Lapins. Prune harder and make sure you're renewing that wood, because if you leave the same wood and you try to grow off that same old wood, it gets about 3, 4, 5 years old, those cherries are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller progressively over time. So that's why I love the UFO system. You're always renewing that wood and you're always bringing in new wood. You have to have that same mentality when it comes to pruning any cherry tree. You always have to be looking at that old wood and cycling it out. And don't go in there and just cut all your suckers out of there mindlessly. That's what the pruner will do if you let them. You have to selectively leave suckers so that you're always cycling in new wood. That's how you're going to have big cherries. And I always tell my pruners, your pruners should touch every single limb. The reason I want them to stiffen every limb and shorten every limb. So instead of having 200 cherries on that limb, I'm going to have 200 small cherries. I'm going to have 100 big cherries. So you want to do that. And then water management. Don't ever for a second let those things get dry and try to fill it back up. Hold those things at 80% of soil moisture capacity. Just hold them there. And for a second, let them get below that. You do those things, you'll have big cherries. I promise you. All the calciums, all the foliars aren't going to help you. You do those cultural practices, you'll have bigger cherries. I promise you. Appleview Orchard again. Have you used calcium nitrate 15.5 for both nitrogen and calcium? Can we continue to use that after summer solstice? Yeah, you can. I even use foliar urea after summer solstice. It'll build strong buds. Won't hurt a thing. Very good question. Yes, I would absolutely use calcium nitrate. That is what I use. Great product. I think I use Mainstay Calcium. Is the foliar product I use. Good question. Yep, you can continue with that, and I would. And this is going to be the last question. So, Altar. One problem I have is blind wood. My neighbor sprayed Maxell in spring, then applied Apogee right after bloom, and it solved the problem to a great extent. What do you think about it? I do that every year. I use I grow my little dards up to about 3 or 4 inches, and I spray them with Apogee as many times as it takes to stop it, and it sets eternal bud. I do that all the time. I don't know what the Maxell would have done for him. The Maxell will help you with thinning. It'll make bigger apples. Neighbor sprayed Maxell in the spring. The Apogee, I see how that would have helped. I don't know how the Maxell contributed to that. That would make bigger apples, and it would help with return bloom. But the Apogee, yeah, I use Apogee for that. If you have blind wood, are your limbs pulled down? You know, a lot of times if you have blind wood, we say grow flop. Pull those limbs down flat, and they'll probably start setting buds up for you. And pull back the nitrogen. Okay, Scott Roas on board, Andres is on board, Abhe's on board, Mark Rash is on board. Hi, Mark. I'm gathering, I think maybe that's Kyle's dad. Nice to have you on board. Appreciate that. I hope that helps. We've had a good night. Again, I shared a couple things with you I don't normally share. I shared that my general fertilizer program. Real basic, real general, but I hope it'll enable you to put together your own fertilizer program. If you can kind of see those 4 different formats that we kind of are forced to deal with, the dormant fertilizer, the fertigation, the foliars, and then the amendments. If you can kind of contextualize those in the way that I've shown you, hopefully that'll help you a little bit. Also, I put the Promlin formula for branching. Again, I don't make chemical recommendations on this channel, but I've developed those myself over the last 45 years, and I'm comfortable giving those to you. I'm sure those will work. My wife and I are going to take a little vacation, so I'm not going to be on the channel next Sunday. I'll be on the following Sunday. I am going to post some videos this week. I'm going to work this week, but Friday I'm going to slip out of here and do some fishing and spend a little time with my wife and do a little bit of traveling. So I won't be here next Sunday. I'll be here the following Sunday. But enjoy interacting with you. I know Marlon does. I want to thank her for doing all the reels and the videos and answering all the questions, helping me with that, and putting this together every Sunday. It's a big help. And we do it because we hope that we're helping young and up-and-coming growers in the tree fruit industry. I'm going to do it for another year or two, but I love the tree fruit industry, and this is my way of giving back a little bit, and I hope it helps. With that, I'm going to wish you a great week, and we'll see you out there. Thank you.